the final step is to now use my finished dried test colors to make and paint my mini landscapes. So now I can see how each of these different types of pigment will dry and which colors I like the best and which ones will go well together. So you can see they actually turned out pretty great. I'm pretty happy with most of them. The lemon juice you can't really see, but the rest are great. So I'm going to set that here where I can see it, and then I'm going to take out my two little drawings from before. I'm going to start with this kind of Alberta rolling hills, and I'm going to get started painting. So I recommend that you do this with enough time to let it dry, because watercolor you can always go back in. So I'm going to start with the earthy color down here, and I think I actually like the paprika. So I'm going to get some of that and just sort of start to paint it on there and smear it around. And you can also overlap colors if you want. For example, I really like the brown in my soy sauce, so I might actually overlap that in spots, because the nice thing about watercolor is that when you sort of mix them together, strange things start to happen. So I've got my paprika, and I'm gonna rinse, and I'm just gonna try and see what happens when I put a little bit of soy sauce. And the beautiful part about watercolor is you don't really get to see what's going on until it's dried. So I'm actually just sort of mixing those two colors right on my page, and we'll see how it turns out. Okay, so I'm gonna speed this up to add the rest of my colors, and then I will come back at the end when it's all finished. Just going to stop here for a second to talk about some things that you might encounter. So when you're painting, if you're finding that your colors, you can see, are like bleeding together, sometimes we want that, sometimes we don't. So the way to stop that or fix it is you can take paper towel and sort of dab it away. But the best thing to do if you don't want those two colors, they sort of tie-dye, they sort of bleed together, is you have to wait for your first color to be dry, or at least partly dry. I didn't do that. So I put the berries, then I started painting the tea, and you can see almost right away the two started kind of bleeding together. It's because they're wet. Now, I don't mind that effect. It's kind of interesting because I'm making a landscape, but we don't always want that to happen. But you can see when I paint the tea in close to my kind of red berry colored bushes, they start to create this, it's almost like tie-dye. So sometimes that's an on purpose. You see that happening right there. Sometimes that's an on purpose effect and it looks really great. And sometimes, so I've got too much water, I'm just going to take some away and kind of keep going. So just wanted to show everybody that. The last step or tip I'm going to give you about your landscape. So I'm almost done. I've painted my sky with this tea, with my tea, and I don't mind this bleeding because I know when it dries, it's going to make a really cool kind of halo effect, like an Alberta sky. But this tea color up here, just plain, it's just flat. So I look at my test and I've got my tea, and what have I got that's close? Worcester, vanilla, red wine, coffee. So I'm going to add some other different color, just a bit into the sky, just a touch, because when it dries, it's going to create this really cool pattern. And I really want my sky to be more than one color. So think about just a little gentle layering. And my cloud, I'm going to leave, I don't know, white, or maybe I'll put with lemon juice. I know not much is going on there, but just so that it's not pure white. Okay, so I look forward to showing this to you once it's dry. And if you feel like your colors aren't dark enough or bright enough, you can always go back and add another layer of paint once it's dry, or even while it's wet. Sometimes you can add a little bit more to just really saturate those colors. Okay, so I'm going to do my second painting and I'll be back to show them to you at the end. All right, and here we are. Finished both landscapes. They just now have to dry. So the first one, I used kind of earthy brown tones. And the second one, I tried to get more of that sky. And I just wanted to show you this up close again. So you can see it's still wet, but this is what happens when you layer side by side colors that are wet and not bleeding. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. So don't be afraid to take your paper towel and dab away extra if there's too much water, okay? And don't be afraid to let it run. That's sort of the beauty sometimes of watercolor. And if at the end, when it's dry and you're still not fully happy with how it looks, you can always go back in again and add kind of some more hard colors or bold colors. So if I want to kind of add this back in at the end and kind of blend them, and don't be afraid to really like layer your colors. That's sort of the beauty of watercolors. They're just really forgiving, and you can see how up here that's happening. Okay, so I can't wait to show you my dried finished result, and I am super excited to see what kind of paintings you'll come up with.